Alrighty, so my first book for this series is The Little Death by Michael Nava, a mystery novel written, I believe, I'm not even sure how long ago. Uh, this is the book. Fantastic book. I highly recommend it. This is the second book in the series that I've read, and is simply a wonderful book. When was it written? It was first published 1986. Man, so it's a legal mystery, which is fascinating, and it has a gay and Chicano protagonist, which is absolutely fascinating. Let us delve into the energies. I find it fascinating that the novels I've read two in the series, like I said, and both are around actually in California. One, the first one, this one out right outside San Francisco, and the other one, the last one, Rag and Bone in the series, um, in LA. And it's fascinating to me that Michael Nava is a Virgo with Mercury in Libra, Venus in Scorpio in Western astrology, and that is the energies of California. And so, reading these books, you get a special insight into the state itself, the energies that govern this, this geographic area and people. Even more fascinating is how awesomely written it is. It's Virgo. I mean, Michael's a Virgo, and it's very much written in a Virgo style. The protagonist, Henry Rios, as Michael said in a couple interviews, is heavily based on his own. Yeah, Michael was a lawyer, and I don't remember, I think a criminal defense lawyer, same as Henry. But basically, Michael was saying about how his own experiences have very much shaped Henry's. And essentially, this series is very much a autobiographical series. And so, man, if that wasn't enough, the writing style is done in a very intimate, very personal way. And so you are in Henry's head. He is thinking, he is feeling with no censor. And you can imagine, especially being published in '86, how revolutionary that was to have a character so open, so personal, and also very different from the heterosexual norm and whatnot. Being gay and being Chicano, we enter into his life. We enter into the discrimination that he's unfortunately suffered, and we live in his shoes. And it's a fascinating affair, truly is, because Michael is a very deeply intelligent individual. He has Mercury in Libra, and he's Virgo, and so he's very industrious, very hardworking, and it shows, man. Henry in this series, and especially in this first one, he is so dedicated to his job, so dedicated to what is right, what he feels is right. That Mercury in Libra is such an idealistic and yet so understanding energy, and we find it time and time again in this series, and especially in this first book. I mean, during this entire first book, he's essentially taking a risk, even to practice the law that he is. He's taking a risk to try and bring justice. That's so Mercury and Libra for you. Let's try and bring justice to a loved one that again, I'm not going to give anything away, but that requires justice being done. And it's fascinating to hear his thoughts about law, about everything, really. Mercury in Libra is such a prolific thinker and can express it so clearly. And so it's very fascinating to delve into this genius mind that has trained for a long, long time in the art of law and in the art of protecting people and with good ideals. He's a fascinating and fantastic lawyer. And it's very interesting to note that Mercury in Libra is absolutely one of those law energies. And so, makes perfect sense considering his profession. And it's very interesting, too. I just noticed this. He's got Mars and Capricorn to have that drive to move forward. In this book, too, you see it, and with Henry, in his absolute, oh man, unflagging endurance and strength to achieve what he's trying to achieve. It's a fantastic series. I can't recommend enough, and this book especially I can't recommend enough. It's again, he is Virgo, so it's very dry. I like it as a Gemini. There, some people are like, oh, it's too fact based. It's too, one step at a time, plotting or whatever. I really enjoyed it. I enjoy getting into people's minds and understanding how they think one step at a time, how things, I mean, life moves one step at a time, and it's not, that's what I love about this series. It's so realistic, and instead of focusing on car chases and ridiculous plots and whatnot, they're very ingenious plots. First of all, in both books I've read, it's absolutely it's spellbinding, really, how it happens. And I find with both of them, in the last 60 pages, I can't stop. I have to keep going. Which is saying something for me, as I'm a Gemini with Mercury and Gemini, and my attention span is literally one of the most challenged, let's say, in all of Earth. So to say that I even finished this book, let alone enjoyed it and could not stop reading it, says a lot. It's fascinating. I learned so much about law, let alone, and that was worth it on its own, because it's delivered to a non-legal audience, an audience that isn't used to law terms and procedures, but it explains it, and at the same time, it doesn't go into it too much, so it makes it palatable. You don't have to get bogged down into, okay, so what does this mean? What does that mean? You can honestly kind of skip those parts if you wish, but I didn't. I love to figure out, okay, so what does this mean? What is that term? I really want to get into Henry's head. What does all this mean? And that's available for you in this novel, and I think that's one of the best things about this novel, is it is so accessible. It's complicated. I don't mean accessible in a simple way, but it's written in a very clear, communicative style, very effusive. And even more to that, what's beautiful about this novel is how much we learn about human behavior. Henry has tons of revelations all the time in both books I've read. I've read the first and the last in the series, by the way. Little Death is the first. It's full of revelations about human character, about life, the human condition, in general. Not just being about being gay and Chicano, which are fascinating revelations on their own. Worlds very different from my own, and I found that horizon expanding, to say the least, to hear about all these different thoughts and feelings from Henry was absolutely fascinating and absolutely beautiful. With both books, I've really taken away this feeling of, I've learned something. Yes, law and human behavior and whatnot, but even more so, something about the human condition that was so beautifully expressed in this series, in this novel. And also something that's interesting is that Venus in Scorpio and Saturn in Scorpio is very present. And in this first novel, it's interesting to note how those powerful energies, Scorpio is very powerful energy, especially Venus in Scorpio. And it's due to that strength that Michael is, Henry, but Michael too, has been able to deal with the intense situations that they've been able to deal with. And especially with Sun in Virgo, to help those people, and Moon in Taurus too, to help those people when they need help the most and when most people aren't helping them. To be brave enough to go into dangerous situations because it's the right thing to do. That is a beautiful lesson. And this book, both books I've read, especially this one, considering the circumstances of his working and the threats on his life that are constantly there, it's so inspiring. It's deeply moving, for sure. It's interesting to see how that power, though, can be very difficult to keep under wraps. In comparison to the last book, where he's gained a lot of years and a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom, knows how to be calm, knows when to speak, when not to. In this book, he still has very much a lot of those characteristics, but it's still a little raw. And that's very interesting to see, because we all have to learn by making mistakes, or by going a little bit too far. And it's fascinating in this novel how I really enjoyed how everything is nice, everything is calm. He's talking to somebody involved with the case, and all of a sudden he's bringing in all of the power of the law, which is, for everything from threats of subpoenas to, oh man, I think the term is deposing. Just, it's very interesting to see the shift, the Mercury and Libra, the two sides of the, yes, harmonious. And that's another thing too, is in addition to those times when he's not so harmonious and emotionally volatile and just goes straight for the jugular, at the same time, the grace that Henry Rios has is very inspiring as well. Again, very effusive, very communicative. And he thinks quickly, he knows how to deal with people. And I love that fact because, my goodness, when it's written from his perspective and so intimately and so confessionally, you can learn so much about how human behavior works and how, I don't want to say to manipulate, because Henry always is influencing and even coercing people. Coercing is a little strong. I would say influencing people out of a higher good, out of ideals, out of wishing for social justice and working hard for that. I was going somewhere with that. I guess it was not important. On that note of Mercury and Libra, I find it's fascinating that the last line of this book is, "Grief is half of justice," she added, and a moment later, "the other half is hope." And I feel like, first of all, the two halves thing is fantastic. I mean, he's a mutable sign, Henry, as well as Michael. And with Mercury and Libra, so two sides, balance. Grief, justice. Or, no, I'm sorry. Grief and hope. And, man, if grief doesn't explain Venus and Saturn and Scorpio conjunct, I don't know what does. And that's another thing that's fascinating is, real quick, and the hope part, if that doesn't explain air optimism, Mercury and Libra, for example, I don't know what does. It's, man, one of my last Spanish course that I took, that I actually read this novel for, as well as Rag and Bone, was very much centered around Chicano culture and LGBT culture, and I have learned just how difficult that can be, that discrimination that exists outside of those cultures, but also inside those cultures. And, inside Chicano culture against gay, and less or so, but still present, inside gay culture against Chicano. And, Saturn and Venus conjunct in Scorpio, it makes a lot of sense as per the gut-wrenchingly difficult emotional turmoil that Henry and Michael have gone through. And I really am so deeply inspired by how positive those challenging energies have turned out. And even when he's, threatening and using that Scorpio side of him, Henry's always fighting for the greater good and for social justice. And he learns so much throughout the series. Again, I don't want to focus too much on the later novels, but my God, he learned so much by that last novel, and there's so much peace and wisdom gained. And yet there's still that struggle. That's what's so beautiful about these novels, is the struggle of human living, especially being in these two cultures are so discriminated against. We feel what he feels. And there isn't another protagonist in literature like this, not to my knowledge, really. I mean, of course, there are similar ones, but this is a very singular series. It's a very interesting case study into this demographic that isn't represented, both Chicano and gay, isn't represented in mainstream literature. And not only all that, so it's not just a novelty thing, it's just so damn well written and so enlightening that I really, really urge you to check out this series. I certainly am going to finish the other novels in this series with gusto, and I'm going to be very, very happy to finally get it all under my belt, because I'm already 2 books in and I'm hooked, man. It's wonderful, especially if you have an Air Mercury. You're gonna love this stuff, and especially if you're involved in law, you're gonna love this series. It's incredible. So I think that's it for The Little Death. Fantastic book, can't recommend enough. Again, Little Death, author Michael Nava, fantastic, and definitely worth a read, close read. Namaste.